A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Quick question. When was the last time you genuinely enjoyed small talk about the weather? If you just rolled your eyes, congratulations. You might be too intelligent for your own social good. Right now, you're probably thinking one of two things. Either, finally, someone gets it. Or, this sounds like pretentious nonsense from antisocial people making excuses. Both reactions prove the same point that German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer made 200 years ago. Intelligent people fundamentally experience social interaction differently than everyone else, and pretending otherwise is making you miserable. Schopenhauer wasn't just some bitter hermit complaining about people. Well, maybe he was a little bit of that. But he also was a brilliant philosopher who identified something most people are too polite to admit. The majority of human social interaction is performative nonsense that intelligent minds find insufferably boring. Think about your last social gathering. How much of the conversation was actually meaningful? How much was just people taking turns making noise with their mouths while waiting for their turn to make different noise? Did you see what happened on that TV show? The weather's been crazy lately. How about those sports teams? Work is so busy right now. If listening to this felt like watching paint dry in slow motion, you're not antisocial. You're intellectually understimulated. Here's what Schopenhauer figured out that most people refuse to acknowledge. Intelligence creates social isolation not because smart people are snobs, but because the gap between intellectual needs and social reality is genuinely unbridgeable for most interactions. Imagine being a professional chef forced to eat nothing but fast food, or a classical musician stuck listening to nothing but commercial jingles. That's what social interaction feels like when your brain craves depth and complexity, but everyone around you is operating at the level of, "How's the weather?" The uncomfortable truth? You're not bad at socializing because you lack social skills. You're bad at socializing because you're trying to have a gourmet meal at McDonald's and wondering why nothing tastes good. Schopenhauer called this the hedgehog's dilemma. Intelligent people need social connection for warmth, but they also need intellectual space to avoid being constantly irritated by the mundane concerns that occupy most people's minds. You can get close enough to feel connected, but not so close that you have to pretend to care about things that bore you to tears. But surely social connection is important for everyone, you're thinking. Maybe I just need to try harder to relate to people. Here's what'll save you years of frustration. Schopenhauer discovered that this impulse to try harder is exactly what makes intelligent people miserable. You're not failing at socializing, you're succeeding at being honest about what actually interests you. And that honesty is about to become your superpower. Part 2. The Intellectual's Guide to Being Genuinely Insufferable. Here's something that'll either validate your entire personality or make you deeply uncomfortable. Schopenhauer believed that truly intelligent people are naturally boring to most others, and most others are naturally boring to truly intelligent people. This isn't an accident or a character flaw. It's a feature, not a bug. Think about what happens when you try to discuss something you're genuinely passionate about with someone who doesn't share that passion. Maybe it's a book that changed your perspective, a philosophical concept that fascinates you, or an idea you've been thinking about for weeks. You start explaining, getting excited about the nuances and implications. You can see their eyes glazing over. They're nodding politely but clearly waiting for you to finish so they can change the subject to something more relatable. Then they pivot to talking about a celebrity scandal or workplace gossip, and suddenly they're animated and engaged while you're the one struggling to stay interested. This isn't a failure of communication, it's a fundamental mismatch of intellectual needs. Schopenhauer observed that intelligence creates what he called intellectual loneliness. The smarter you are, the fewer people share your interests, understand your references, or find the same things engaging that you do. Most people bond over shared experiences, the same TV shows, the same social dramas, the same cultural touchstones. But intelligent people often bond over shared ideas, and ideas are much more specific and much less universal than experiences. You can watch the same movie as someone and have completely different thoughts about it. You can read the same news story and draw completely different conclusions. You can attend the same event and notice completely different details. This is why intelligent people often feel like they're speaking a different language, even when they're literally using the same words as everyone else. But here's where it gets interesting. Schopenhauer argued that this isn't a problem to be solved. It's a reality to be accepted and even embraced. The attempt to make yourself more socially palatable by dumbing down your interests or pretending to care about things that bore you isn't just dishonest. It's self-destructive. You end up building relationships based on a version of yourself that doesn't actually exist. Think about the people you feel most comfortable around. Chances are, they're either as weird as you are in similar ways, or they're comfortable with you being weird in ways they don't necessarily understand but appreciate anyway. The people who make you feel like you have to perform a more normal version of yourself aren't bad people, they're just not your people. Schopenhauer's insight was radical for its time and remains radical today. Instead of trying to become more socially acceptable, intelligent people should become more comfortable with being socially selective. Quality over quantity isn't just a preference, it's a psychological necessity for people whose minds work differently than the majority. The goal isn't to be likable to everyone. The goal is to be genuinely yourself with the people who appreciate that self. Everyone else can enjoy their small talk about the weather, while you enjoy your deep conversations about whatever actually matters to you. Part 3. The Hedgehog's Dilemma, or Why You Need People But Can't Stand Them. Schopenhauer told a story about hedgehogs trying to stay warm in winter. They huddle together for warmth, but their quills prick each other. They move apart to avoid the pain, but then they get cold again. They spend the whole winter moving closer and farther apart, trying to find the perfect distance for warmth without injury. Sound familiar? This is exactly what happens to intelligent people in social situations. You need human connection. Loneliness is genuinely painful, and isolation can drive you crazy. But most social interaction feels like getting poked by tiny quills of boredom, superficiality, and having to pretend interest in things that make you want to escape. You want to connect, but connection often requires participating in social rituals that feel meaningless or even actively irritating. The birthday party where you have to make small talk with acquaintances about nothing. The work social event where you're supposed to be fun and approachable. The family gathering where you're expected to show interest in gossip about people you barely know. You show up because you're supposed to, but you spend the entire time thinking about how you'd rather be literally anywhere else doing literally anything else. Then you go home and feel guilty about being antisocial, or you worry that something's wrong with you for not enjoying things that other people seem to find effortlessly fun. Here's what Schopenhauer understood that most people miss. This isn't a character defect. It's an inevitable consequence of having a mind that requires more intellectual stimulation than most social situations provide. Your brain is like a sports car that's been designed for high-performance driving, but you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic going 5 miles per hour. The problem isn't with your car, it's with the road you're on. Most social interaction is designed for the lowest common denominator. It's optimized for including everyone, which means it's automatically not optimized for people who need depth, complexity, or intellectual challenge to feel engaged. This is why intelligent people often prefer one-on-one conversations to group settings, written communication to verbal communication, and planned interactions to spontaneous socializing. These formats allow for the kind of depth and focus that group small talk makes impossible. But here's the crucial insight. Understanding this pattern doesn't mean you should become a hermit. It means you should become strategic about when, where, and how you socialize. Instead of trying to force yourself to enjoy large group gatherings, you can prioritize intimate conversations with people who share your interests. Instead of pretending to care about small talk, you can steer conversations toward topics that actually engage you. Instead of feeling guilty about leaving parties early, you can accept that your social battery has different specifications than other people's social batteries. The hedgehog's dilemma isn't solved by removing all the quills or learning to ignore the pain. It's solved by finding the right distance and the right companions for the kind of warmth you actually need. Part 4. Why boring people think you're boring. Here's a truth that'll either liberate you or devastate you. The people who find you boring at parties probably also find books boring, ideas boring, and anything that requires more than surface-level engagement boring. You're not failing to be interesting. You're failing to be interested in uninteresting things. Schopenhauer observed that what most people call social skills is actually the ability to be enthusiastic about mundane topics and to make mundane topics seem more important than they are. Think about someone you know who's considered great at parties. What makes them great? Usually it's their ability to make small talk feel significant, to treat casual gossip like important news, and to be genuinely excited about things that don't actually matter. This isn't a criticism. It's a genuine social skill that serves important functions. It makes people feel comfortable, included, and validated. It creates a sense of shared experience and community. But it's also completely exhausting if your brain doesn't naturally operate that way. When you try to participate in this kind of socializing, you're not just pretending to be interested in boring topics. You're pretending to be the kind of person who finds those topics naturally engaging. You're performing an entire personality that doesn't match your actual internal experience. This is why socializing feels so draining for intelligent people. It's not just that you're around people, it's that you're constantly performing a version of yourself that requires enormous amounts of energy to maintain. Meanwhile, the people who are naturally good at this kind of socializing look at you struggling to fake enthusiasm for their conversation topics and think, why is this person so awkward and boring? They're not wrong that you're awkward in that context, but they're wrong about why. You're not awkward because you lack social skills. You're awkward because you're trying to use skills you don't have for goals you don't actually want to achieve in order to impress people whose approval you don't actually value. It's like trying to play basketball with tennis rules while everyone else is playing tennis with basketball rules, and then wondering why nothing feels natural or fun. Schopenhauer's insight was that this mismatch isn't a problem to be solved through better social skills training or more practice at small talk. It's a fundamental difference in what different types of minds find engaging and meaningful. The solution isn't to become better at pretending to care about things you don't care about. The solution is to stop pretending and start finding contexts where you can be genuinely engaged instead of performing engagement. This might mean smaller gatherings, different types of events, or completely different social circles. It definitely means giving yourself permission to be selectively social instead of universally social. The people who think you're boring at parties aren't your audience. Your audience is the person who lights up when you start talking about something you're genuinely passionate about, even if that thing would put most people to sleep. Those people exist. You just have to stop trying to connect with everyone else long enough to find them. Part 5. The philosophy of strategic antisocial behavior. Here's something that'll make you feel better about every social event you've ever left early. Schopenhauer argued that intelligent people who try too hard to be social are actually betraying their own nature and making themselves miserable in the process. He called it the tyranny of sociability, the social pressure that makes people believe they must enjoy group activities, small talk, and constant social stimulation in order to be psychologically healthy. But what if the opposite is true? What if intelligent people actually need solitude and selective socializing to function at their best? Think about when you do your best thinking. Is it at a crowded party? During a group brainstorming session? While making small talk with acquaintances? Probably not. You probably do your best thinking when you're alone, or in quiet conversation with one person who understands how your mind works, or while engaging with ideas through books, writing, or other solitary activities. This isn't antisocial behavior, it's pro-intellectual behavior. You're not avoiding people because you hate people. You're managing your social energy so you can engage meaningfully when it matters. Schopenhauer believed that society had it backwards. Instead of seeing solitary people as deficient in social skills, we should see constantly social people as deficient in intellectual depth. Instead of seeing preference for small groups as antisocial, we should see it as discriminating. Instead of seeing dislike of small talk as rudeness, we should see it as honesty about what kinds of interaction are actually valuable. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or treating other people badly. It means being strategic about when, where, and how you invest your social energy. Strategic antisocial behavior looks like declining invitations to events you know will bore you instead of going and being miserable. Leaving parties when you're done instead of staying because you think you're supposed to. Having fewer, deeper friendships instead of many shallow acquaintanceships. Choosing quality conversations over quantity conversations. Prioritizing activities that engage your mind over activities that just fill time. Being honest about your preferences instead of pretending to enjoy things you don't enjoy. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it actually makes you better company for the people who appreciate the real you. When you stop wasting energy on social situations that drain you, you have more energy available for social situations that energize you. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you can be genuinely yourself with the people who matter. Schopenhauer's radical insight was that intelligent people don't need to become more social. They need to become more selective about their socializing. The goal isn't to fit in everywhere. The goal is to find the places where you don't have to fit in because you already belong. This requires giving up the fantasy that you can be universally liked and universally comfortable in all social situations. But it offers something much better: the possibility of being genuinely understood and appreciated by the people whose opinion actually matters to you. Most people spend their entire lives trying to be liked by people they don't particularly like, in situations they don't particularly enjoy, talking about things they don't particularly care about. Intelligent people have the opportunity to opt out of this exhausting performance and create a social life that actually fits their intellectual and emotional needs. The question is, are you brave enough to be selectively antisocial in service of being genuinely social with the right people? Part 6. The aristocracy of intelligence and why you're probably in it. Here's where Schopenhauer gets controversial. He believed that intelligence creates a natural aristocracy, and that acknowledging this aristocracy is essential for intelligent people's psychological well-being. Before you get uncomfortable, he wasn't talking about money, power, or social status. He was talking about the aristocracy of mind, the small percentage of people who think deeply, question assumptions, and find meaning in ideas rather than just experiences. If you've ever felt like you're fundamentally different from most people, if you've ever wondered why everyone else seems to care so much about things that seem trivial to you, if you've ever felt lonely in a crowd, you might be part of this intellectual aristocracy, whether you realize it or not. This isn't about being better than other people. It's about being different from other people in ways that create different needs and different challenges. Think about what you actually enjoy. Deep conversations about abstract concepts, books that challenge your assumptions, art that makes you think differently, ideas that take time to fully understand. Now think about what most people seem to enjoy: celebrity gossip, reality TV, small talk about everyday events, activities that don't require much mental effort. Neither preference is right or wrong, but they're fundamentally incompatible. You can't have a deep philosophical discussion about the nature of consciousness with someone who wants to talk about what their coworker wore to the office yesterday. Schopenhauer argued that pretending these differences don't exist, or trying to bridge them through compromise, just makes everyone miserable. The intellectual person feels frustrated and bored. The non-intellectual person feels intimidated or confused. The solution isn't to eliminate the differences. It's to acknowledge them and organize your social life accordingly. This means accepting that you're going to have more in common with some people than others, and that this has nothing to do with anyone's worth as a human being. It just has to do with compatibility. You wouldn't expect a professional athlete to enjoy the same physical activities as someone who hates exercise. You wouldn't expect a musician to enjoy the same sounds as someone who's tone deaf. So why do we expect people with different intellectual needs to enjoy the same social activities? The aristocracy of intelligence isn't about superiority, it's about specificity. Your mind has specific requirements for stimulation, challenge, and engagement. Meeting those requirements isn't selfish or snobby. It's necessary for your mental health. This means seeking out other people who share your intellectual curiosity, even if they're harder to find. It means prioritizing depth over breadth in your relationships. It means being comfortable with having fewer friends who actually understand you, rather than many friends who only know your surface-level social persona. It also means being generous and kind to people who operate differently than you do, while not expecting them to be your primary source of intellectual companionship. The goal isn't to look down on people who enjoy small talk and celebrity gossip. The goal is to stop forcing yourself to pretend you enjoy those things too. Schopenhauer believed that accepting your place in the intellectual aristocracy isn't arrogant, it's honest. And that honesty is the foundation for building a social life that actually serves your psychological needs instead of constantly frustrating them. You don't have to apologize for being intelligent any more than an athlete has to apologize for being athletic, or an artist has to apologize for being artistic. Your mind is what it is. The question is, are you going to honor it or betray it in service of fitting in with people who are never going to truly understand you anyway? Part 7. The liberation of intellectual solitude. After all this talk about social incompatibility and intellectual aristocracy, you might be wondering, so should I just give up on other people entirely and become a hermit? Schopenhauer's answer would surprise you. No, but you should become comfortable enough with solitude that you never again settle for bad company just to avoid being alone. The liberation isn't in rejecting all social interaction. It's in rejecting the idea that you need to be socially successful in contexts that were never designed for minds like yours. Here's what that looks like in practice. You stop apologizing for leaving parties early. When your social battery is drained, it's drained. Staying longer doesn't make you more social, it makes you resentful and exhausted. You stop pretending to find boring conversations interesting. Instead of nodding along to small talk, you either steer the conversation towards something engaging, or you politely disengage. You stop feeling guilty about preferring books to people most of the time. Books don't interrupt your thoughts, demand emotional labor, or require you to pretend enthusiasm for things that bore you. You stop measuring your social success by how well you fit in with groups that don't match your interests. Instead, you measure it by how authentic you can be with the people who actually matter to you. You stop treating solitude as a consolation prize for social failure. Instead, you recognize it as the natural habitat for deep thinking, creative work, and mental restoration. The beautiful paradox Schopenhauer identified is this: when you become genuinely comfortable being alone, you become much better company for other people. You're no longer desperate for connection, so you can be selective about the connections you make. You're no longer performing a socially acceptable version of yourself, so the people who are drawn to you are drawn to who you actually are. You're no longer drained from forcing yourself into incompatible social situations, so you have more energy for relationships that actually work. The goal isn't to become antisocial, it's to become consciously social. to choose your social interactions based on what serves your intellectual and emotional needs, rather than what meets other people's expectations of how you should behave. This might mean having intense conversations with one person instead of casual conversations with 10 people. It might mean spending Friday night reading instead of going to a bar. It might mean building friendships around shared ideas instead of shared activities. The liberation of intellectual solitude doesn't mean you'll never be lonely. It means you'll never again be lonely while surrounded by people who don't understand you. And that, Schopenhauer argued, is the difference between productive solitude and destructive isolation. Productive solitude gives you space to think, create, and recharge, so you can engage meaningfully when you choose to. Destructive isolation cuts you off from the few people who could actually appreciate your mind. The key is learning to tell the difference and having the courage to choose quality over quantity in every aspect of your social life. In a world that constantly tells you to be more social, more outgoing, more accommodating to other people's social preferences, Schopenhauer offers a different message. Be more yourself. Your intelligence isn't a social defect to be overcome. It's a gift to be honored and shared with people who can appreciate it. The right people will find your depth fascinating instead of boring, your selectivity discriminating instead of antisocial, and your preference for meaningful conversation refreshing instead of pretentious. Those people exist. You just have to stop wasting time trying to connect with everyone else long enough to find them. If this exploration of intellectual solitude has made you feel less alone in your aloneness, remember, Schopenhauer wrote his philosophy while living mostly in solitude, and his ideas have connected with millions of people across centuries. Sometimes the most social thing you can do is be genuinely antisocial until you find your tribe. Next week, we're exploring Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, why most people are psychological slaves, and how to become your own master. Subscribe now, because understanding the will to power might be the key to finally becoming who you're supposed to be. Your journey toward intellectual authenticity is just beginning, and Schopenhauer's insights are your permission slip to stop pretending to be someone you're not, for people who are never going to understand you anyway.